A couple of transitionary thoughts that I have before we get back into my presentation as that's being loaded is emphasizing kindness, and I also want to emphasize grace. Start extending grace to yourself, which makes it easier to extend grace to others. We are so incredibly hard on ourselves, especially as leaders. We already know that we're held to a different standard. We are in that place of leadership, of influence. And so please, 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 I encourage you to extend grace to yourselves, which makes it easier for you to extend grace to others. Kudos for you being here and for you showing up. I'm just so impressed. Again, I can completely relate. I was in the same space last week. I know you're looking forward to half a day tomorrow. Kudos and congratulations for being here. I can imagine it just seems like a fire hose of information, and you are getting it. It is sinking in, and some of it will come back to you tomorrow, next week, a month from now. Stay with it, continue to write the notes, and just have a good time. A couple of other acronyms that I'd like to share with you that are very appropriate as we transition from our breakout groups back to the main session. STUFF is an acronym for stress, time constraints, uncertainty, fatigue, and fear. Stress, time constraints, uncertainty, fatigue, and fear. We're all dealing with stuff on a regular basis. Stress, sometimes from the minute we get up until the minute we go to bed. Time constraints, there's never enough time and always too much to do. Uncertainty, which takes us back to the what's important now. Sometimes we're not very clear about that. Fatigue, don't need to say anything else about that. And fear, which in itself is another acronym, false evidence appearing real. You may see false evidence that says, right now, I'm not doing so hot as a leader. It's false. You're doing great. Keep it up. And then the other acronym that I want to share with you is NETS, and that stands for nutrition, exercise, training of the brain, and sleep. So I encourage you, make sure that you're eating well and hydrating, especially the rest of today and tomorrow. Exercise is important. It's going to take a little bit more than 5 toe-ups, but get some exercise. Even if you're just walking around the block, do that. Training of the brain is huge. So the assessments that I had you do as part of your pre-work, that was some brain training. And then sleep. I cannot stress sleep enough. We cannot make up for sleep on the weekends that we've missed during the week. And over time, it will catch up with you. My husband knows that if he sees me laid out on the couch over the weekend, I didn't rest enough. So I encourage you, rest before you need it. Because by the time you realize just how tired you are, good luck trying to keep up on that. So I shared those things just to encourage you as leaders to stay in it and keep going, and you're doing a fine job. So at this point, I believe a message was sent to the facilitators to ask for a spokesperson to outbrief to the rest of the group what your conversation was like. So the first question, how has the virtual environment impacted your team? Who wants to come and share what your discussion covered? Give us a little synopsis.
We talked a lot about, I suppose, the things that you would expect us to talk about, that a lot of people have found it particularly difficult over this time, not having those opportunities to engage with each other, particularly where we've had people who have been moving organisation. We talked a little bit as well about the fact that although most of us are probably at a certain stage in our lives, given that we're on an event like this, we had to recognise with some empathy those who are at earlier stages in their lives where, whilst our lives may have been curtailed, people in their 20s who might have expected at this point to be going out and doing a lot of socialising and meeting with their friends have not had the opportunity to do that. So although we've all had difficult experiences, it could be very different for different people. But yeah, I think just that opportunity to get together and to meet people and to feel like we were part of a team has been something that's a bit of a challenge for all of us.
Mm-hmm. Thank you so much for sharing that. It's been a challenge for all of us, but I think you're right. Folks in their early career, they're really feeling it because they've not had that experience outside of college, assuming that they went to university. So thank you for sharing that. Who had question 2? What might your team be grieving over right now?
We've got a number of different ways of looking at this in the group. One was about the fact that people were grieving the fact they couldn't go away. So we had the whole problem of people amassing lots of annual leave because that's a consequence of the fact that I can't go away, I can't go on holiday, and the whole thinking around that, like that's what something they would look forward to doing and plan for and anticipate. So that was one part of the grieving. And that impacts on how you feel about being where you are, that you're not going away. Then the camaraderie in the office was the one that was immediately common to all of us, which was the water cooler conversations, the walking to the tea room, walking into town together. Like we were saying before, people in your office who might be feeling a bit distressed or they've been taking a difficult call. And you can see that when you're in the office, you can supply the support. And so even that other part of camaraderie, the real genuine support needed to get you through the tough times, wasn't there. And that's above and beyond the banter and the general feeling really connected physically and viscerally with your colleagues, and the sensing of emotion and atmosphere. And also we talked a little bit about the transitions, how sometimes transitions have gone, like the previous speaker was saying. You know, there are transitions and several stages of life affecting people at work. So even if you're not personally going through a transition, somebody at home where you're working from is going through that transition or loss of transition. Mm-hmm. And you're dealing with that as well. And sometimes things like recruitment have changed as well. Mm-hmm. So the opportunity to progress or the opportunity for development, those sorts of things are there. So it's been quite varied, above and beyond what grieving people might have experienced because of the pandemic.
Thank you so much for sharing. That is key. So often we typically think of grieving in terms of the death of a loved one, but all of the examples that you have shared are absolutely reasons to grieve, especially if we're so used to. Think about the fact that in the workplace, we spend probably more time with the folks that we work with than we do at home. So those are our work families. So of course, we're grieving the loss of those connections and the loss of opportunity, whatever opportunity looks like. So those are all very, very valid things to be grieving and things that we as leaders need to be aware of. Oftentimes we think, well, people just aren't getting with the program. No. What might they be grieving that they need to go through that process in order that they can move forward? So thank you. Excellent, excellent examples. So who had question 3? What is your vision as a leader of teams in the new normal?
So that would be me. Hello, I'm Kim. I'm going to talk for our group 3. And we had an initial discussion about what does new normal actually mean? Who's to say it's a new normal? What is normal? And I particularly like the terminology in Bridges' model when it's talked about new beginnings. So what are the new beginnings? And I guess that would be really where our starting point is as a group. We talked about that not one size will fit all. There's something about you can't have this is the new beginning and this is how we're going to work from now on, because you're right, it's not like grieving a lost one. We've got these ways of working for the last 2 years, and now what are we going to bring through and what we are going to leave behind? And so some of the terms that we used were about being flexible as leaders, being bold as leaders, and not be risk averse. The discussion was around during the last 2 years, decisions have been made very quickly with some risk attached, but they had to be made quickly. So there's something about what do we bring of that with us as well. The discussions around not having one version for everybody is that there were people from emergency services, I'm from an emergency service, was that during the pandemic, for some, it was carrying on. So whether you were on an ambulance, a fire truck, whether you were in a police car, if that was your role beforehand, you still did do that. And the discussion of the adversity at the start with not the correct PPP. Now, we know that changed, and it wasn't about sort of resting on that. It was different challenges for different people. So we talked about, as a leader, if you've got a team that some is operational frontline and some is not, we have to balance the great things that have happened through lockdown as a leader, the ability to work from home, the ability to manage children differently, and all those types of things, that have the ability to just get up and go for a walk. As opposed to being in that operational role, and talked a bit about that it shouldn't be in the too hard to box, not in the too hard to look at box, about seeing how we could transfer that and what we've learned across the other roles. So I think I've gathered everything. And a term I like that one of the groups said, as leaders, it's about leaning in more and getting in with the team. So I think that summarised our discussions. Thank you.
I love it. Kim, was that your name, Kim? Did I get your name correctly?
Yes, Kim. Yeah.
Kim. Beautiful summary, Kim. When I heard you say the new normal and what does that look like, and it looks different for everyone, what immediately came to mind is a term that I've been hearing since about the middle of last year, the next normal. Yes. Because every day it could be a new normal. So now we need to look at what's the next normal going to be. And then you mentioned leaders need to now lean into their teams. When I first started teaching Spin Cycle, which was well over 20 years ago, right after my certification, I took a time slot that had never existed before. So there were like 3 people that showed up, and they were all friends from a previous course. So I'm thinking to myself, well, it's kind of silly for me to be up at the front, and I've got 3 people in a cycle studio of 27 empty bikes. So right off the bat, I decided to sit in between them, and I consider them as team rides. So now I'm not up at the front giving instruction. I'm riding with the team. And not only did it make the ride more comfortable for everyone, but my self-confidence went up as a new leader. And I think when you talk about leaning in, that came to mind because even though we may or may not be new leaders, we're leading in a new way, in a new environment, with new circumstances. And so I'm picturing in my mind my early classes where I'm sitting there in the middle of 4, maybe 5 other people, and we're leaning into this journey together. And as leaders, we absolutely need to get in close with our teams, get in tight, and lead together because it's a new experience. And there are going to be some days where we ourselves as leaders need our confidence boosted. And I just love that picture. So thank you for that. I appreciate that. Question 4, what new and different team dynamics seem to be working?
Hi, Dr. Anita. This is Bethan. I was with group 4. So we were talking about, as you say, new different team dynamics that seem to be working. We sort of started off by talking about that sort of lack of connection that has come in because we're all on the screen, and the idea that teams fatigue, screen fatigue has really started to sort of take hold, and now we're a couple of years down the road. But that was versus the far more accessible, in a numbers sort of game way, the far more accessible reach that Teams has given us. So people talked about virtual meetings reaching far more people at any one time, and they're all hearing the same message that isn't getting diluted or slightly changed, so that you know that everyone's getting the message you want them to get, and they're all getting it at the same time, and then they can sort of jump off from that. One of the other things, which was a really interesting one, was a team that are already a disparate team. So they're in different parts of Wales, which they never used to do this, but now they have coffee and cake catch-ups every sort of Thursday. It's in a virtual sense that they've introduced that. They really love it, so they're going to keep that going. But it's interesting that it was maybe the pandemic that brought that coffee and cake catch up around. It's actually called coffee and cack, but I won't go into that. There was also this idea of some people have started to meet face to face now, and that's actually been quite exhausting. It's a real different type of energy has taken over meeting face to face. It was a little bit awkward. Just that first time, do we shake hands? Do we not? What happens in that space? So talking about that sort of blend moving forward of face-to-face and virtual. Quite a few people said they miss that easy popping into the office, catching up with people that teams were able to do when we were all on the same corridors or in the same open spaces. And now, you have to actually think about calling someone if you think they're, you need to chat to them for whatever reason, or you think they might be a little bit down. You can't just pop in and see them. So a few people said they want to be reducing teams so that opportunity to pop in and see people comes back, and people popping in to see you, of course, as well. What else did we do? There was also about starting meetings with a check-in now, which was maybe something that didn't happen before. How are you feeling? That has generated a real new dynamic in teams, and that has deepened relationships. So definitely something that will keep going, that check-in, like your one breath check-in to start the meeting. And then we did finish on a note which is a blessing for some people. People who require a little bit more personal space are really glad that there's no more hugging. So that's what we finished on.
That's funny, because in the chat someone had said that they went to hug their ex-boss and their ex-boss was like, what? It just kind of took them over the edge. I think that's funny. I'm typically not a hugger, but I have to say, because I love being in the environment, whenever I get a chance to hug somebody, I just do it, because I've been so sequestered in my office. So I get both sides of the equation. Thank you for sharing. A lot of what you shared is going to go to what we're going to talk about in a few minutes about the flip side of VUCA. So who had question 5? What is better or more effective about your team now, and why? What is better and more effective?
So it's Fee, Dr. Anita. We had this one in our group. Hi there. Okay. We had some great stories. So we had a lot more collaboration and cohesion, staff teams being knocked out for various health and various circumstances, but actually other people coming in to cover them. So this real sense of standing in to fill the gap so that the service remained the same. We had increased tech skills and people coming in to help each other meet the skills, find the skills and build the capacities they need. We had much less travel, so much better work-life balance. That came up more than once. So the travel meant that people were in better shape, could see more of their families. And then a build on that was that we saw we saw the real selves of each other, because there were dogs and kids and various circumstances that would inevitably come into the meeting. We had and then another sort of aspect, we had a focus, more digital skills, blended approaches with family working well. We then had regular staff meetings twice a week, which was a new development for this 30-person team, meant that there was much more integration and inclusivity. Everyone knew more standard sort of understanding of what was going on, and more people involved. Fantastic example there also of stars and cheerleaders. We had cheerleaders coming in for every member of staff, had a cheerleader, and the person was a star themselves who had the cheerleader. So this kind of web of support just overlaid on that team. Wonderful. And then another one was improved external communications and relationships came through the pandemic as well, beyond the organisation. So really quite a lot around what was better and more effective about teams.
I love it. I love it. Thank you, Fee. When you mention things getting better beyond the organization, it brings to mind another book that I've written, BYOB, The Most Effective Workplace Strategy. And it's got nothing to do with bring your own bottle, but it's how do we think beyond our own box, our organizational boxes, and the roles that we fulfill. How can we think beyond those boxes? So wonderful feedback. Last question. After all of this wonderful discussion, still, we need to be realistic. What's one lingering area of concern for your team, and why? One lingering area. Yes.
That was me. And my group was depleted in terms of number and in energy, so we cut it short. And one of the things I wanted to discuss is that fire hose you mentioned at the start of your exposition. Now, there's an awful lot of stuff going on. People are getting tired. So my concern as a facilitator here is how do we embed this and not just let it go?
Jeremy, that is a fair question. And we're going to get to that in about 10 minutes.
Aha.
I'm going to make you wait, Jeremy. I'm going to make you wait. But the bottom line is we have to be intentional, right? I have a podcast, and this year I started with the challenge of, do we want to make more resolutions about things that will probably fall through the cracks in 3 days? Or do we want to be intentional? And so it goes to intention. And when we're intentional, we think about the steps that we're going to make to get us where we're trying to go. Another acronym, AIM, we've all heard of SMART goals, but an AIM SMART goal is acceptable, ideal, and middle. And the analogy that I like to use for that is the saying that we've heard, if you shoot for the moon and fall among the stars, you're still on high ground. So if the acceptable is going from the blue atmosphere to the black atmosphere, you know you've made some progress. If the ideal is obviously landing on the moon, there you go. And the middle is falling among the stars. And sometimes when you fall among the stars, that's an opportunity for you to reassess and say, the view's pretty good here. Do I really need to go to the moon? What's the point, right? So when we think about intentionality in terms of what's my acceptable, ideal, in my middle, it might help us determine where we actually need to be, which goes back to the when, what's important now. So thank you all for your feedback. Jeremy, thank you for allowing me to tease you and give you a little bit of a hard time right there. We are going to get into, though, how can we make this stick? Because that's a huge question. I mentioned that last week I spent 3.5 days in a session, and by the time I got done, I'm not only wondering, how do I make it stick, but did anything get in here, especially the last day and a half? And I can imagine that that's where some of you might be. Trust me, it's in there. It really is. And you will see it when you most need it. So very quickly, we've already introduced psychological safety. Yay, we're a little bit ahead of the curve. So I want you to shout out for me what you are taking away from this acronym of psychological safety in terms of what you think you need the most. 3 people. Which one is probably what you need the most? Security, autonomy, fairness, esteem, or trust?
I would say all of them.
Okay.
And I know your question was, which one would you like the most, or do you need the most?
Right.
But actually, for me, it's a mixture of it all going forward.
Okay. That's fair. Anyone else identify one that they know they need the most? Autonomy, okay. Trust, all right. Very good.
Security.
Security, I'm so glad someone said that. That's mine. So to leave as an employee to a consultant, where's the security in that? None. But you also need to follow your passion and your calling. And that's what I call who-do alignment. And we have to be very careful that we don't confuse who we are with what we do, right? Because when that title is gone, we feel like we have no identity. But I always stress, wherever you can, find that alignment between who you are and what you do, but not to confuse the two. Very good. Autonomy. Yeah, security. Autonomy and security seem to be the winners these days. That's absolutely understandable. So let's go to our motivational behavior styles. All right. By a show of hands, and I wish I could see more people, who identified most as an achiever? An achiever. Let me see. Okay. And who identified most as an affiliator? Let me see. Okay, very good. And who identified most as an influencer? Let's see. Okay, so we've got a room of achievers and affiliators. All right. And did anyone have an equally high number in 2 areas? Anyone at all? Okay. Please share your name and tell me what your 2 highest scores were.
Is that me? I'm not sure. I'm Matt anyway. Sorry, I probably misunderstood that a little bit, but I had 2 equally high areas in my second one. So my highest one was achievement, but then power and affiliation were fairly balanced. Okay.
And achiever was your very highest one. Okay, very good. So in terms of team dynamics and what motivates people in terms of leadership, it seems like we're pretty fairly split between those who want to get things done and those who want to get things done with people. That's what it sounds like we're dealing with here. So if that's being the case, who's going out and influencing to help make sure that we're socializing ideas and getting help across different areas so that we're not siloed with either other people who like to get stuff done or other people who like to get stuff done with other people? Because sometimes we can be so busy with our tribe and hanging out with our peeps and getting stuff done with folks that we already know that we miss opportunities to make bridges across other parts of the business. Someone had 30 in all three. Wow, Suzanne, that's quite rare. Congratulations. So that means that you've got an ability to flex. Good for you. I don't know where Suzanne is, but thank you for sharing that. One got a 32 in affiliation and a 31 in achievement. That's pretty close. So good. Flexibility is good. Now, let me say this. I'm not pigeonholing anyone, but it's to say it's important as leaders that we know how we're motivated. Because if we're motivated to get stuff done, some people might see that as bossy or pushy. If we're motivated by affiliation, some people might see that as, oh, they just like to hang out with people. There's strengths in either one. How are we leveraging our motivation to make sure that the optics match what's going on internally? Because what people see externally can be very different from how we're motivated internally. So now I'd like to go to the style under stress assessment. And I asked you to fill it out, but not to tally it. We're going to do it together because the tallying on this particular assessment can be a little bit confusing. So I'd like for you to go ahead and get your assessment. And if you go to the second page, the third page, where it says your style under stress results, here's what I would like for you to do. In the bottom left corner, you're going to see the first grouping that says withdrawal. Okay. Question 1, if you got a T, if it was true for you, put a check mark. If it was not true for you, put a dash. Question 2, if it was true for you, put a check mark. If it wasn't true for you, put a dash through it and continue on. So now we'll go to question 3. If it's true for you, put a check. If it's not, put a dash. Question 4, if it was true for you, put a check. If not, put a dash. Same with question 5. True, check, not, dash. Question 6, and so on and so forth until you get to 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, and 12. Go ahead and do that. Then when you get done with that, at the bottom where it says silence total, however many check marks you got, put that number. And then over to the right, however many check marks you got under that, put that number. So to the left is your silence total, and to the right is your violence total. Is everyone following me? That being the case, we're all learning and growing together. If you look at your scores, you either scored higher in the silence or the violence. And the silence is typically withdrawing, masking, and avoiding. Or if you're in the violence, it's not physical violence. You either tend to use controlling language, or you label, or you use attacking language. Now, without going into a whole lot of depth, it's important to know for yourself how you react to stress. And when you know for yourself how you react to stress, you can mitigate the impacts to other people. So for instance, when I'm stressed, I go to avoiding. Now, because I know that about myself, if I'm stressed, I can go to someone and say, right now, I need a little bit of space. I need a little bit of time to myself. I am not cutting off the relationship. But because I'm stressed, I want to make sure that I don't say anything that I'm going to regret later. So for you to know that I'm not trying to end the relationship, I'm letting you know that I need some space. Well, if I don't do that, and if I start to withdraw, what could that look like to someone?
That you're not interested anymore.
Yes, that you're not interested anymore. And that can impact the team or your co-leaders in terms of what?
Motivation, trust, confidence.
Mm-hmm. That you're losing it? That it's decreasing? What else could it look like to people that work with us when we are starting to withdraw, but they don't know that that's our reaction to stress? How can that look to people? That you don't care, right? And so the importance of even having an idea of how you react to stress helps you manage your relationships better. Because what you know about yourself, I need some space, I need to withdraw, to everybody else that you don't share that information with, they're cutting us off, they no longer want to be a team player, they're devaluing the relationship, or whatever else is going on in their minds. So it goes back to, how do I show someone appreciation? Ask them what they want. How do I let how do I figure out if I just need to listen to my team or if I need to help them solve a problem? Ask them what they want from me. It goes back to communication. If you're stressed and you withdraw, you tell people, I need a little bit of space right now. Give me some time and I will re-engage. So that they don't, right? If we don't tell people things, they come up with stories. And we need to avoid stories at all costs. So how about if you end up in the violent zone and you start using controlling or labeling or attacking language? We all know that that's a bad scene, right? But if you start to do that and you know that that's just your stress response, how does that impact the people around you?
Creates fear.
Yes. Oh, yes, it creates fear. And what usually accompanies fear on a team?
Like closure, sort of disengagement.
There it is. Closure and disengagement. Absolutely. So again, it's not to out yourself if you happen to be in the controlling category, but in the violence category, but it is to say you must know how you react to stress so that you can, first of all, diffuse it for yourself. But secondly, you can also explain, again, team, I need a little bit of space. I don't want to say anything today that I might regret tomorrow, right? And I will re-engage. So the two factors of knowing your motivational style and your stress style are huge in terms of understanding yourself better so that you can lead others better. Not only that, but now that you have a general sense of what those two categories show up like, now you can recognize that in your people. And if someone seems to be withdrawing, you can go to them and say, are you okay? Is the stress level a little high? Come talk to me. Or if someone who normally is sweet as pie starts to show up differently verbally, again, you don't have to jump to assumptions. You can go to them. Are you okay? You don't seem to be showing up the way we're accustomed to. Is this helping you? Okay, very good. So now I'd like for you to think about this situation. If we tie it all together in terms of our psychological safety, our motivational behavior styles, and our stress styles, think of one team member or a co-leader and what they seem to need most in terms of psychological safety, what their motivational behavior style might be, and which domain they tend to fall into in terms of stress, and what the implications might be for the rest of the team. So, for example, if you've got someone whose high need is fairness for everyone, right? And their motivational behavior style is affiliator, but under stress, they go into the violence mode, which means they can be verbally abusive. What does that look like and how does that impact the team? More shocking. Yeah.
It could be confusing for the team because one minute you're friendly and affiliative, and then the next minute the sort of language changes. So they wouldn't know quite who was going to show up.
Yes, absolutely. And that goes to fear, that goes to disengagement, that goes to lower productivity. So now that you've gotten some of these insights, and again, I grant you it's on a high level, but now that you've gotten some insights possibly into yourself, and now you can pick up on some cues related to your team members, that's also going to help increase the connectedness of you as a leader and as your teams when you can head some of these behaviors off at the path because you're now aware of some signals of what might be behind some of the behaviors that you're seeing, and you can have some open, honest discussions. Very good. So now let's talk about deepening trust by 1% to engage teams and thrive in the new normal by being intentional about team dynamics. So here's the first thought that I have for you. Again, in the back of your book, and hopefully you still have some space in there, write down these questions. What part of the current team dynamics might people feel is being done to them? And how can you reframe it as something that they can be a part of? That's the first question. What part of current team dynamics might people feel is being done to them, and how can you reframe that as something they can be part of? And because we're running short of time, I'm just going to ask you to write these questions down for reflection later. So that was reframing change. The next question, demonstrating inclusivity. How can you include their thoughts as part of the solution for whatever that top thing is that you said they might feel like is being done to them? So the second question, how can you include their thoughts as part of the solution? And in terms of promoting agility, the third question I have for you is, what can they do that stretches the strength to benefit the team? Remember, we did the toe raises and we said, even though we walk around every day and we use our calf muscles, we don't really feel it. What is the strength that you can identify within the team that can be used to benefit the team in terms of solving this problem that they might see as being done to them rather than something that they're being part of in terms of change? So now let's get to the flip side of VUCA. And VUCA stands for what?
Volatility.
Yes.
Uncertainty.
Uh-huh.
Complexity and ambiguity.
Yes, yes, yes. Volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. So let's look at this. This is an opportunity to turn volatility into vision and to get creative as a leader. This is an opportunity to transfer complexity into clarity, going back to those AIM SMART goals. Well, if this is what we're trying to do, what's our acceptable, what's our ideal, and what's our middle ground of in terms of success? And then finally, from ambiguity to agility and thinking beyond your own box. All of this is the time to value every voice and get everyone involved, remembering to meet people where they are, remembering that everyone's 100% looks different, and remembering that doesn't mean to lower your standards as a leader, but to accept people where they are and sometimes help them get them where you want them to be. So let's talk about journaling your experience. So for the next few minutes, I'm going to give you some time to write in your journal. For 3 minutes, I want you to compare and contrast our session with your one-word expectation and intention for today. I believe I asked you for that first thing this morning. What was your one-word expectation for today and your one-word intention? And compare and contrast that with what we've actually done together. Then for 2 minutes, I want you to record what you liked, what you learned, and how you will lead yourself and or your teams differently. And then for 1 minute, I want you to note your most impactful aha moment and what makes it so. So that's 6 minutes. I'm going to go ahead and keep time for you. Tuna, thank you very much for sharing that. Turbulent, uncertain, novel, and ambiguous. I'm going to write that down. Very good. All right, moving forward. So now, journaling in your action plan. So in your book, Connected Leadership, I want you to go back a few pages from where you've been taking your notes. And there was a section for your key takeaways and a section for you to draft your personal action plan. And I hope that you completed that as part of your pre-work because you're going to be referring back to those over the next 30 days. So think about this. What do I need to let go of in order to move on? What do I need to let go of in order to move on? And think about something that's doable. It might be that you need to let go of being so hard on yourself so that you can move on a little bit faster. It might be that you need to readjust your expectations of what 100% means for everyone on your team. What is something that you need to let go of in order to move on and make sure there's something doable? Write that down, please. Then, in terms of how you're going to get there, there are 4 activities that make it really easy to set yourself up for success. And that is to think about what you can stop, start, do more of, or do less of. So there are some examples. Can we stop making assumptions? Can we start being curious? Can we listen with our heart more? Can we judge with our heart less? Using those as kind of templates, what are some actions that you can take in the areas above to achieve the goal that you just wrote down? And who's going to be your accountability partner for the next 30 days? So here's your challenge. Between now and our next session, I would like for you to complete these following activities. Number 1, create a reflective learning journal to track your aha moments over the next 30 days. Now, a lot of people think journaling has to be one long page. A journal entry can be one word if that captures it for you. It can be one sentence. It can be a paragraph. It can be a page. But I encourage you to create a reflective learning journal to write down your aha moments over the next 30 days. Specifically on page 1, I do want you to write down what you really care about. Minimum half page, no more than a full page. What you really care about. And I'm not putting any parameters on that. Whatever you really care about, I want you to write that down. Then on the second page, assess how what you really care about influences your leadership. So the two go hand in hand. And then once a week, share your daily reflections with an accountability partner and discuss how your start, stop, more or less action plan in your connected leadership book is aligned with what you really care about. And the next time we get together, I want to hear about how your 30-day action plan is going. I want to hear about your aha moments. And we're going to allow for 3 people to get some one-on-one laser coaching with me. So I'm really looking forward to our next session. Thank you so much for your attentiveness and your participation. I know you're pushing through. Get some good rest, have a good meal, and get yourself ready for a half day tomorrow. Thank you so much for having me.